All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, now talking to Jason Gladu from a very interesting company called Convertr. And what do they do? Well, they focus on contact information and they focus on high quality data. How about that action, right? Uh, many years ago now, probably 20 odd years ago, maybe longer, an old employer of mine, the Data Warehousing Institute, ran a report on data quality as it affects cost in things like marketing and customer outreach and so forth. And it was a gobsmacking number. It was just shocking how much money is lost because people are either mailing things to the wrong address or sending things to the wrong email or sending wrong things to that email or sending wrong things to even phone banking or whatever. Point is, quality really matters, and it certainly matters in sales. I'm a sales guy. I sell for this company. I'm not just sales. We also do content, all these other things. But I know from lots of experience that sales has a rhythm to it. And when you get in a rhythm of selling stuff, it can continue. If you get into a rhythm of not selling stuff, that can continue. And bad quality data is probably top of the list in terms of things that go wrong. But with that, Jason Gladu, I'll bring you in. Convertr, I love this concept, Convertr, I think, right? Is how you spell it.
hmm
And pretty cool stuff. You would agree, right? Data quality means a lot for sales.
Yeah, I think, bad data quality has your sales reps wasting a ton of time chasing ghosts in effect. And
That's
it's,
right.
I think we saw some numbers the other day. It was like 5 to 7 minutes per bad, record that a rep is trying to chase down. And that's just that one person, not even
Right.
all the other costs associated with that bad piece of contact data.
Right. Yeah, it's brutal. And my key point is it hurts morale. And so as a salesperson, you want to be making sales or at least making progress. Your attitude can stay positive as long as you're making progress, but it's when you just spin your wheels and you realize another bad data, another more bad data, or even angry people like, why are you emailing me this information or whatever, like that, none of that is good for sales. So if you
Yeah.
want good sales, you want high quality data and you want really good numbers like 95, 96% accuracy. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think it comes down to trust, right? It's all about trusting, especially from a sales perspective, you're trusting marketing to give you good, high quality data. I think even, beyond sales, as we think about it, teams internally want to trust their data so they know that whatever they're building, whatever their job is building, the next product for a company, trying to help sales sell more, help market more, you want to trust that the data that you're basing your assumptions on is accurate.
Right. Yeah, that's good stuff. So tell me, like, how did you get into this? Like, how did you get into the space of focusing on data quality for contact records?
Yeah, it's I think it's been a long time. I think historically, Converted is an interesting company. I think we started out in the automotive industry with McLaren and
Really?
Fiat Chrysler, and it was all about how do you ingest driving forms, right? People want to drive a car. How do you ingest that and route it and cleanse it to the right dealership so that people, are saying, hey, I want the brochure, I want to take a test drive. And that was a little bit more challenging, 10 or 12 years ago when we first started doing it. As we did that, we built more in-house technology, and then kind of ended up in the tech space as, I think big tech clients like Dell and HP and Microsoft all sort of were struggling with that same infrastructure problem. And now it's sort of accelerating with the rise of AI and all the internal machines and all the internal just infrastructure that a lot of large enterprises have that rely
Yeah.
on clean data.
Yeah, and you focus on speed as well of reconciliation, right? Like you focus on sitting in between a form, for example, and the vendor's intake, such that whatever is coming in, you're immediately running your algorithm on it. You mentioned, I think, your email is primary key. So it's like,
Yep.
okay, this email is associated with this person. Let's bring in the data that we have. This is the record, and boom, it goes right through the other side, right?
Yeah, so it's, on average, I think we process millions of records every single week. And so it's, I think on average, the record processes in under a second. And that
Wow.
is not just like looking to see if the email is valid, but that is on average, I think it's about 32 different processes run against a record, whether that's transforming pieces of that information to make it match downstream systems or calling out to enrichment services to append more information to the data or
Hmm.
what have you.
Wow. That's great because people do move. But
Hmm.
there is this trend too. It's funny. I've seen this. I've been in the demand gen space now for I'm afraid to admit a quarter century, so a pretty long time. And there's a trend. It started a few years ago, and it's really catching on now of business email. We want to get your business email. I'm like, okay, I appreciate that, but I can tell you that most people who sign up don't want to use their business email. They want to use their personal email. And the people who are on the vendor side are like, oh, but we want the business email. I'm like, I get that, but remember, business email will change. Like they'll leave the company and then that email is now invalid. And a lot of times the companies will not truncate the email address. So I see more and more because I'll check. I do email marketing, so I check and I look up and see, okay, who's this person, who's that person. You realize they're gone, but their email is still alive and someone is still checking that email, right? So that's another factor to keep in mind and another reason why personal email really isn't all that bad. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's, valid sides to both arguments, right? I think on one hand, it's like send, relevant enough content. And if they put their personal email in, they'll engage with you. They're still a person, right? It's,
Right,
human to human, is how we buy, right?
right,
It's not, organizations don't buy things, people do. Um, and I think we've seen it, multitudes of ways, right? If somebody wants to provide their personal email, can you look up the business email? Like I think there's ways to do that. You want to make sure you're doing things appropriately for wherever you are in the world and whatever local laws apply.
right.
Um, but I think our perspective is, let's build the technology to enable it, so companies and marketing ops teams and demand gen folks can execute the way they need to.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. What's your take on the cycle of usability for email as a marketing tactic? And what I mean is, text messages, obviously SMS, it can be very good for consumer products, for example, not so much for B2B or enterprise stuff. Then there's, of course, direct mail, there's phone calls, email, and then social, which, that's been pushed very heavily for a while now, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, in the consumer space, more Facebook, maybe Reddit, other places, even Discord, for example. I still view email as king, meaning it's probably the primary transactional medium for communication. But what do you see happening in the industry, and is that changing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with your perspective. There's a lots of you've got a lot more channels today than you ever have, but email is still the primary driver for, B2B companies. It's where they spend all of their time. It's how they communicate internally and externally.
Right.
And for, whether or not we like it or not, I think it's here to stay. And I think it's why you see large companies focusing so much on, making sure that like their hard bounce rate, for instance, and their brand reputation and the scores of their domains are still very, very high because you don't want to impact delivery,
Right.
and ruin your reputation.
Right.
And if email wasn't so critical anymore, people would care a lot less. But I don't see that happening, and I see the large enterprises, doubling down on that hard bounce rate to try to get it as low as they possibly can.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've also seen, and this started probably 3 or 4 years ago, a real focus by the big guys, and I'm thinking Google and Microsoft in particular, but Yahoo as well and others, in trying to crack down on spam, which is a worthy cause. Spam is obnoxious, especially, just spam that has nothing to do with anything you want. Or phishing, of course, which is a
Mhm.
terrible tactic and it's just all over the gosh darn place. But the rules changed and it became harder to do email. It became harder to get your emails into inboxes. What's your take on where that's going? Like deliverability rates, for example, we don't do big blasts anymore like we used to do 30, 40K at once. Now I chop that into 10K chunks and email separately so there's not too much throughput at any one time to improve deliverability, right? And you don't know what all the rules are. You have to kind of ascertain what they are. But I think that's one of the trend lines, right? Is to be more strategic, don't do huge blasts if you can. Try to chunk them up a little bit. But what's your take on all that?
Yeah, I think you see that combined with sort of the move to, I'm not sure what it's called now, but it's the move from what was personalization to
Hmm.
now sort of far more contextual. It's not just like, hi, Eric, I saw you went to the University of Texas or whatever it is. It's
Right.
actually something far more compelling about the organization or about what, maybe a project they have going on that you're ascertaining from, 10Ks or whatever information you can get. I
Right.
don't think that that's necessarily impacts deliverability right out of the gate. I think over time it helps improve sender scores and things of that nature if you do things properly. And I
Right.
think so. I think that combined with a focus on how do we, make our sends more narrow or more targeted, we'll see improvements.
Right. One of my friends in the media, he made this observation. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago now, but it's still pretty relevant because we were talking about all the push for social media. And there were a lot of people saying, oh, yeah, forget email. It's all going to be LinkedIn now or Instagram or whatever. And it's like, okay, I can tell you what I've seen in terms of transactions, in terms of someone actually registering for an event, giving their details, filling out the form, which is what you want. You want to get that opt-in basically. Email is still far and away king. I mean, you're starting to chip away a little bit on LinkedIn, very little on Facebook. Again, but I'm a B2B guy, so I'm not in the consumer space, right? But what are you seeing in terms of traction per medium for registration, for like actually
Yeah.
getting someone's information?
We see on the B2B side, because that's primarily where we play, we see the same thing, right? I think we've seen, LinkedIn certainly creeping up there. I think it gets expensive with the in-mails. And, I think that's the benefit of email to a degree is it's
Right.
relatively, inexpensive to execute on.
Sure.
Our own internal events, for instance, we see a lot more success out of email than we do out of any
Right.
other channel. But
Nice.
again, I think to a point we were talking about earlier, it's the omni-channel approach. Like, how do you surround them and sort of build that holistic message to hit them with multiple angles, whether that's, ads and email and LinkedIn, et cetera, to try
Right.
to really drive home the narrative.
Right. And I think, and you may have hinted at this earlier, I think that we are going to be entering a new phase now, or it's already happening, where you'll get some pretty sophisticated models tracking customer engagement, what has been the domain of the customer data platform, for example. I think you're going to see some pretty clever models monitoring a holistic view of the enterprise. Where are we in terms of sales? Where are we in terms of inventory? Where are we in terms of top line revenue, bottom line revenue, things of this nature, and have engines that are responding accordingly. So, one of the more clever things I've come across is you've got a product company that has lots and lots and lots of products, and you got inventory levels that you're monitoring all the time. And if you notice, for example, hey, we got all this stuff sitting in this warehouse over there. Why is that? Well, if you have an AI that is constantly kind of crawling across these systems and looking for changes and looking for outliers, it can say, hey, you should do a promotion for these special kind of shoes because summer is coming. And it's like, that's the kind of thing I think which is really valuable because the AI isn't doing necessarily something for you, but it's suggesting something based upon the data. And I think that's one of the key ways that AI will really manifest value is making recommendations
Mhm.
based upon patterns, usage, information in the organization right now, and objectives. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think in that example, I think you have everything from an agent who's making the recommendation to an agent that's seeing the high level of inventory and then just executing a campaign sort of without letting anybody know, right? Which is a really interesting problem to solve. And I think when you look in the like a B2B enterprise, it's maybe it doesn't have physical inventory like that. You see everything from how do I build these agents internally to whether it's to run marketing programs, to suggest we launch into a new market, and all of that comes down to, making sure that if they're going to operate autonomously, just like in the product example, you've got to make sure that that data is really solid and, critically you understand the lineage of that data. Like what
Yeah.
is the agent able to pick up? What
Right.
is okay for it to act on from a database perspective or data? And then what is sort of off limits? I think we saw one recently where it was like you have an agent that went out and started cold calling people and it accidentally cold called people on the do not call list, right? And so that's a
No.
huge issue, right? Huge fines, huge implications. I saw that story the other day, and it's like,
Ouch.
and that just kind of hit home for me. I was like, if you have that infrastructure, you can make sure that you're not hitting that do not call list. You're making sure everything is clean going in.
Wow. What a great point. And you kind of have to name things as well. I mean, we forget that the agents don't have all the context that we have. You just presume, but it's like, no. They do not
Hmm.
have that context. So, naming it a do not call list, it's like, oh, okay, do not call list. Maybe that's not, maybe I shouldn't call
Yeah.
those people on a do not call list. Yeah, that's right, because they'll be very unhappy and they'll
Yeah,
cause you
yeah.
some
There's
trouble.
there's the basic naming, and then you could start putting in some guardrails and infrastructure in place to make sure you're like, hey, you don't even have access to this. Like you literally cannot find these people because we've scrubbed them from existence because we don't
Right,
want you to ever even
right.
think about them.
Right, that's right. Yeah, you want an architecture and guardrails. Well, folks, look this gentleman up online, Jason Gladu. The company is Convertr. It's Convertr. Very cool stuff. They're the ones making sure that you get the relevant information that you're looking for and not all that nasty spam. So we'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio.